You've seen the photos. Afghanistan, Chechnya, Ukraine. Soldiers perched on top of armored vehicles, exposed to enemy fire, wind and weather. Not inside where the armor is. On top. This isn't bravado. This is survival math. The Soviet Union began developing a new type of vehicle. Nuclear weapons had changed everything. The assumption was that infantry would travel kilometers over contaminated ground. Tanks were ready for radiation conditions. Infantry wasn't. The answer was Object 765, later called the BMP-1. Production started at Chelyabinsk tractor plant, the first mass-produced infantry fighting vehicle in the world. Soviet engineers created something revolutionary, a vehicle that could transport troops, provide fire support, and keep pace with tanks across any terrain. It had a 73mm smoothbore cannon capable of firing armor-piercing or high-explosive rounds, a PKT coaxial machine gun welded directly to the turret, an anti-tank guided missile launcher for heavily armored targets. 8 infantry could ride in the back. The original design even included firing ports on the sides. Small holes in the hull so soldiers could shoot from inside. That feature was hated immediately. The ports weakened the armor and added almost no combat power. They were eventually removed. The BMP could swim across rivers, travel at 65 kilometers per hour, even be dropped from aircraft. The design was built for a nuclear battlefield where speed mattered more than thick armor. Low silhouette, use terrain folds, avoid direct fire. That was the doctrine. The armor could stop shrapnel, resist .50 caliber machine gun rounds from a Browning M2. Maybe. That was the problem. An RPG-7 goes straight through. Improvised explosive devices gut the interior. Heavy machine guns like the DSHK or NSV with armor-piercing rounds punch holes in the hull. Anti-tank mines turned the crew compartment into a crematorium. The 73mm cannon itself was a problem. Noticeably inaccurate, unreliable, single shot only. Had to be manually reloaded after every round. The rate of fire was too slow for follow-up shots. Non-export Russian models came with auto-loaders, reportedly even slower than hand-loading. Dangerous to operate. The vehicle was front-heavy. Bad news for amphibious crossings. The nose could catch in river mud and the whole thing would bog down or flip. The turret was cramped. One man, just the gunner, sitting alone with limited visibility. Afghanistan taught this lesson first, then Chechnya, then every conflict since. Russian soldiers gave it a nickname, Bratskaya Mogila Pekhoti, the mass grave of infantry. Here's what happens inside a BMP when it hits a mine. The blast enters through the thin bottom armor. The crew compartment becomes a pressure vessel. Shrapnel and concussive force have nowhere to go but through flesh. Survival rate inside, near zero. Now here's what happens when you're sitting on top. The blast throws you clear. You might break bones. You might get shredded by shrapnel. But you have a chance. Inside, you're trapped. Outside, you can be thrown free. Soldiers made this calculation over and over. Blood taught them. The math is simple. Better odds on the roof than in the coffin. The tactical advantages stack up fast. Dismounting from a BMP through the small troop doors takes time. 10, maybe 15 seconds if everything goes right. When ambush happens, you don't have 15 seconds. Sitting on top means you jump off, hit cover, and return fire in under 3 seconds. 8 to 10 soldiers on top can maintain 360-degree observation. They divide sectors, watch for threats, spot the roadside bomb before the vehicle hits it. Inside the compartment, limited vision ports give you almost nothing. You're blind, dependent on the vehicle commander's view. By the time you know you're under attack, it's already too late. Afghanistan proved this repeatedly. Convoys getting hit in mountain passes. Soldiers inside never saw it coming. Soldiers on top spotted the ambush positions and returned fire while dismounting. The difference was survival. During the Chechen Wars, BMPs became cargo trucks. Supply lines were constantly under attack. Ambushes and guerrilla warfare made resupply dangerous and irregular. The supply problem had been a weak link since the Soviet army days. In Chechnya, it became critical. Soldiers stuffed their vehicles with everything: food, ammunition, medical supplies, spare clothing, water. Light vehicles like BMPs, BTRs, and MTLBs became the only reliable way to move supplies forward. Wounded soldiers took priority for interior space. 3 casualties could fill most of the passenger capacity. When you're carrying wounded and the supplies needed to operate independently for days, there's no room left. The roof became overflow seating by default. Nobody asked. Nobody had to. You made space for the wounded inside. Everyone else rode on top. This became so common that it was simply accepted. Not in the manual, not officially sanctioned, just how it was done. This practice isn't uniquely Russian. American soldiers rode on top of M113 armored personnel carriers throughout Vietnam. Same reasons: better visibility, faster dismount, survival odds against mines that could turn the interior into a crematorium. The difference is what came after. The M2 Bradley is half a meter taller than a BMP, twice as heavy. It sacrificed swimming capability completely, can't be airdropped, but it uses composite armor, steel, ceramic plates, aluminum alloys, real protection, improved mine protection, shock absorption systems in the crew compartment. When a Bradley takes a hit, the crew has a legitimate chance of survival. The armor does its job. The BMP costs about $1.9 million. Cheap. The Toyota Corolla of armored vehicles. If you throw enough of them at a problem, you'll probably get the job done. That was the doctrine. Quantity over quality. The BMP-3, introduced in 1987, went the other direction from the Bradley. Added a 100mm gun on top of the 30mm cannon. More firepower. Same thin armor. The philosophy never changed: speed and weapons over protection. Soviet forces in Afghanistan learned fast. Mujahideen fighters used RPG-7s, recoilless rifles, landmines. But the real problem was elevation. The BMP-1's 73mm gun couldn't elevate high enough to engage targets in mountainous terrain. Maximum elevation angle was insufficient. Convoys got ambushed from high ground. Soldiers inside couldn't return fire. The Mujahideen would position themselves on mountains above the convoys and rain fire down. BMP crews were helpless. This problem was acute enough that by 1980, the BMP-2 appeared. Complete weapons overhaul. The 73mm was gone, replaced with a 30mm autocannon. Fully automatic. Belt-fed. 550 rounds per minute instead of manually loading single shots. The turret changed too. 2-man design now. Commander sitting with the gunner instead of alone. Better optics. A laser rangefinder. Night sight. And crucially, higher gun elevation. The 30mm could now engage targets at steep angles. Could even fire at airborne targets. The 30mm had longer range. Better accuracy. Much more effective against the targets it actually faced. But kept the same weak armor. Soldiers kept riding on top because the threat from mines and IEDs was constant. By the time of Chechnya, the practice was standard doctrine. Not official, not taught, just accepted. Everyone knew why. The BMP's fire control systems are outdated. Even the BMP-3 lacks thermal imaging. Just night vision that requires an active infrared spotlight. That spotlight marks your position for anyone with night vision equipment. You light yourself up to see. Visibility range, maybe 100 meters. That's it. No target tracking. No stabilization for firing on the move. No data link to share targeting information. The system can't capture targets, track them, or display them on screen. Forget about transmitting information to any common unit system. The weapons are formidable on paper. In practice, the vehicle is blind in modern combat. Explosive reactive armor was added to defeat anti-tank missiles. It doesn't work against modern systems. Javelins, NLAWs, and top attack munitions bypass it completely. The BMP-3, introduced in 1987, went for overwhelming firepower. Added a 100mm main gun alongside the 30mm cannon and 7.62mm machine gun. More weapons than most tanks. The idea was overkill. If you can't have thick armor, have enough guns to destroy threats before they destroy you. The engine placement changed too. Moved to the rear of the vehicle, mounted below the troop compartment instead of up front like most IFVs. This was a trade-off. Gave the front of the vehicle additional armor protection, but made the crew compartment more cramped for dismounts. Most infantry fighting vehicles put the engine up front specifically to maximize rear space so troops can get in and out quickly. The BMP-3 went the opposite direction. But here's the cruel irony. They reduced the turret elevation angle again, back to BMP-1 levels. The lesson from Afghanistan, forgotten. The BMP-3 supposedly can fire accurately while stationary, moving, or even afloat. Claims 600 kilometers operational range, 72 kilometers per hour on roads. Protection against 12.7mm rounds and possibly greater, if you believe Russian reports. After seeing BMP performance in Ukraine, those claims are doubtful. The vehicle that was supposed to keep infantry alive became the thing they need to escape from. Over 30 countries use the BMP in some form. Modernized versions, local variants, all based on the same fundamental design from the 1960s. The armor hasn't changed, the protection hasn't improved. Russia knows this. They've been developing a replacement called the Kurganets 25. Heavy armor, ammunition storage isolated from the crew, better protection for troops inside. Basically, a Russian answer to the Bradley. It's been in development for years. Nobody knows if it will ever actually appear. Meanwhile, soldiers continue to make the same calculation their predecessors made in Afghanistan. Better to risk a bullet from outside than guaranteed death from a mine inside. You see them on top of BMPs in every conflict. Not because they're reckless, because they've done the math. Because they've seen what happens to the soldiers who stay inside. The BMP was revolutionary when it appeared. First of its kind. But it was designed for a war that never happened. Speed and firepower for breakthrough operations on a nuclear battlefield. The wars that did happen were different. Ambushes, IEDs, urban combat, anti-tank weapons everywhere. Every flaw in the concept got exposed. Thin armor that couldn't protect from threats that mattered. Cramped interior that made it a death trap. Poor visibility that left crews blind. No mine protection in conflicts defined by mines. The vehicle became a liability instead of an asset. So they ride on top. They have since Afghanistan. They still do today. From mountain passes to urban streets to open fields. Because sometimes the vehicle designed to protect you is the most dangerous place to be. That's not doctrine, that's survival.